Welcome to the Homesteaders of America YouTube channel. We have a pretty special video for you today. This is part of our 2020 garden tour series, and we're gonna get into this video pretty soon where I take a tour of a local garden center that I absolutely adore, and as well as interviewing the original owner of the garden center who has a lot of good homesteader wisdom and inspiration to share with you. First, before you go anywhere, make sure you subscribe to our channel to get updates and notifications, and that way you don't miss any future videos. Also, like I mentioned, this is part of the garden tour series. So that means we have new collaborators every Monday from May through the middle of December showing you their gardens. So make sure you check out those collaborators for this week in the description of this video. I've linked every single one of them, as well as a playlist that you can check out from videos that you may have missed from the previous weeks in May. All right, we're gonna get started with this week's video here on the Homesteaders of America channel, where I took a nice tour and did some interviews with the owners of Windmill Heights Garden Center in Culpeper, Virginia.
My name is Hutcheson, and the name of my business is Windmill Heights Garden Center. So originally, the business was started by my grandfather, and I purchased it from him in 2012. I went to school at Virginia Tech and studied horticulture, and of course I grew up in and around the greenhouses working for my grandfather, as well as helping in my parents' vegetable garden. My dad is also an avid gardener and also an avid vegetable gardener. So he has both flower gardens and vegetable gardens. And so I grew up around plants, grew up around flowers. But anyway, so after I graduated from tech, I came back to town and bought the business. So I've been running it for eight and a half years. And so we've slowly transitioned away from doing deliveries to other businesses and focused more on doing retail. And as the years have gone on, people have different needs, different desires for what they want. Vegetable gardening has stayed pretty constant, I'd say, as the decades go on. We still grow. Probably a fifth of our business is still vegetables, but now people are in this area more affluent. They're into things that are pretty. We do a lot of hanging baskets and tropicals and house plants and flowers for the garden. So that's been the big change. Now this year with everything, definitely have seen an increase in people gardening for the first time, whether it be flower gardening or whether it be vegetable gardening. People are interested in doing something with all the free time that they have. So that's been really interesting to watch new people who've never gardened get into it. It's really interesting seeing how the different trends affect what people are interested in, and but it's good to see people getting back into growing plants, whether it be a tomato or whether it's a house plant. Our mission statement is we believe plants bring beauty and happiness to people, and we connect people with plants. So that's our mission statement. So.
Would you say that you've seen a bigger increase in vegetable gardening more than any type of gardening this year, or is it just gardening across the board?
I think it's actually gardening across the board. And part of that is partly because we're still a somewhat rural area. We always have done a lot of vegetable sales. Like last year, we had great vegetable sales, and there were, so this year certainly our vegetable sales are up, but it's not like it went from 0 to 60. It's maybe a 15% increase. But the frost we got last week also helped sales because everybody who bought tomatoes in April is coming back for more, which is unfortunate. We had a frost on May 11th, which is really late. Typically, we're done by May 10th.
My name is Mason Haynes Hutcheson, and the background for my interest in the greenhouses came from how I was raised in Southern Virginia, in Mecklenburg County. It was agrarian, a society, community. There was everybody was just the same. We lived off the land as much as possible, and of course that was tough because we had to be paying attention to. We had cows. There was no electricity. We had a well in the front yard, and the septic was down in the woods with the edge of the garden, so we had to walk there. So that was everybody's situation. We had Daddy worked horses in the field, and we had hogs that were raised for killing in the fall, and had a smokehouse to cure the ham, sides, and that brought meat supply. Then, of course, the vegetable gardens. It was after World War II, and I was born in '35. And then we had the Victory Gardens. Sugar and gas were rationed. Daddy and Mama had a Model A Ford. I rode in that for the first 15 years of my life, and glad to have had that transportation. Farmers looked out for one another. The wives, they'd share the bartering. Somebody would give a pat of butter, and somebody else would have a gallon of milk, and so there was people looked after one another. The alarm system on the farms was the bell. If anybody was in trouble, they rang the bell, and the other farmers got over there on the wagons or rode the horses and to help one another. Gardening work on the farm was pretty intense. You had to know how to take a hoe to the row and not only keep the weeds out, but keep the crops broken to prevent weed growth, and then, of course, the harvesting of the different crops. Canning was a big thing in the community because that was the only way to preserve with no electricity. And that, of course, helped me in the discipline life when I was accepted at Virginia Tech, and was in the Corps Cadets, and then majored in dairy science, and graduated. The interest that came about from a small greenhouse grower that took my interest to start a moonlight job, because our 4 children, Joyce and my 4 children, were growing up, and I knew that we wouldn't be in a position to have cows to milk and hogs to feed, or horses in the field to work the gardens. But the greenhouse would seem to be a good fit. So the gentleman asked me to come to the greenhouse. He had a little 17-foot by a 45-foot frame, and he was interested in finding out what was causing the snapdragons to die back in the seed tray. And so before I left, he said, "Mason, let me sell you this little greenhouse because I'm getting of age now, and I'd like to change." So anyway, I bought that little frame, moved it down to where we had 28 acres north of town, and set that up, and we started growing our first plants. in those days, it was the big boy hybrid tomato plant that was the most popular plant. And the greens industry in 1962, 3, and 4, and early 60s, nobody, it was only 1 or 2 places that sold loose pulled plants. Sweet potato plants were just pulled by the handful, and tomatoes were sold. Plants were shipped in from and wrapped in paper from further south, and of the veggie plants, pepper, tomato, cabbage, broccoli, all those were sold just by a handful wrapped in paper and just shipped dry, as far as that's concerned, except the wet paper. And then the greenhouseman that I spoke of, that let me have his house for him, he brought tomato plants in trays, and the retailer in the store would count out as many plants as he wanted, and then he would pull those up out of the tray, wrap them in paper, whether it be petunias or whether it be tomatoes or whatever, and wrap them in paper, and were sold just like that, which is really a slow go. And they said, well, Mason, you can't make a profit selling handfuls of plants. And they told me about the 3-inch peat pots that were coming in from Norway at that time, a penny a pot. And so we had to build trays to put in 24 3-inch peat pots, and then we started out with sand off the river, but that was too heavy and wasn't workable. The salesman came through and said that they developed this called Jiffy Mix. And so that's how that started out, to buy loose bags of Jiffy Mix, put it in the 3-inch pots, and my retailer thought that people would not pay 15, 20 cents for a 3-inch pot of big boy tomato plant. But I told him just try it, and I'd take them back if they didn't sell. So then he had a change of mind when the people came in, saw the nice big foot tall plants in a 3-inch pot, and they were glad to pay just pennies, you might say, for a tomato plant, and the retailer ordered a whole lot more. And so that's what started off. There were other flower plants that we grew along with that, and such as pansies and zinnias, and so that's basically how that began to grow. And that was the greens industry in its very beginning in the 60s, and so it just began to gradually grow up from there. And then my 2 grandsons, Paul and Mark Hutcheson, came. They were homeschoolers, and so they were able to work here each week at some hours. And then Paul wrote a letter to me one time indicating that he wondered if it would be all right if he was able to do greenhouses someday and be able to take over my greenhouse business. And that's the way it turned out 9 years ago, for which I'm very, very glad.
A germination chamber. It's got a heating element, a water heater element, that's got a puddle of water, a big reservoir, and it heats the water up, and that hot, humid air will rise up through here. And so it's got a thermostat on this other side. You set it to usually 78 degrees, and then you sow your seed in plug trays or open trays or whatever, and you water them down really good and you put them in here. And the idea is it keeps it warm and it keeps it humid, because one of the big problems with germinating seeds, because a lot of times if they dry out, they're so tender it'll kill them. So you really want them to be constantly warm and constantly humid. And so we use this to germinate everything that needs warm temperatures. It wouldn't be good for like cabbage, kale, broccoli, because it's too hard. It's too easy to get it too hot. But like tomatoes and things like that. So we'll put seed in here, and usually we'll get germination on tomatoes in about 5 or 6 days, and then peppers, it's usually like 9 or 10 days. We'll get germination on marigolds in 24 to 36 hours. The greenhouse industry is a lot more complicated, I think, than people realize. So the vegetables, we do all our vegetables from seed. We do most of the herbs from seed, the ones that are done from seed. So like dill, basil, cilantro, we do all those from seed. And then there's some that are from cuttings, like lavender and rosemary. They don't do well from seed. You can do them from seed, but they really are better done from cuttings. And I just choose to buy those in from people that specialize in doing rooted cuttings. And then the flowers are kind of split 50-50. There's a lot of flowers that are done from seed, like marigolds and celosia, zinnias, things like that are done from seed. And as time has gone on, really starting back in like the 90s, but then really kicking off in the new century, there's a lot of plants that are patented. Okay. So a lot of people don't know that. When you buy, you buy a petunia and it's got a fancy name on it, I've had to pay a royalty on it, and it's wrapped into the price of the plant. But as part of that royalty, propagation is unlicensed propagation is prohibited. And we only have 14,000 square feet of heated greenhouse space. So it sounds like a lot to you, but it's not even a half an acre. It's really not that much for a greenhouse operation. So we try to grow what we can grow really well, and then buy in what we can't grow really well. And for the most part, a lot of the places we're buying from are really local. So the blueberry plants are coming from Richmond. That's only like an hour away. All of our trees and shrubs are coming from near in Nelson County, which is only like an hour and 15 minutes away. This is the thermostat. It's got a probe, so then you put it, in your seed tray, and you set the temperature. For most things, you'd be like 75 to 80 degrees. Peppers, you'd want to be warmer. You want to be 85 for peppers. This is similar to what my granddad was describing in terms of sprouting your own sweet potatoes. So in the bottom of this, I put a tuber, a sweet potato tuber. I put it in here, put it on the heat pad, and then over maybe 2 or 3 weeks later, it starts sprouting. So then, you cover the tuber in, this is a mixture of potting soil and perlite, but you could just use regular potting soil. And then what happens is, as it sprouts up through, the tuber is buried 6 inches down. So then what you do is you have a sweet potato plant that's got roots on it, because it roots all along the stem, and now you can plant this out in your garden as soon as the frost is gone. So off of 2 tubers, I've gotten 75 sweet potato plants.
No kidding.
And these are tubers that are left over from last year. So this gives you an idea of you could literally feed your whole family off of 2 tubers.
Okay, so what are your 5 favorite plants that you grow here?
Oh man, I love figs, and that's actually not something that I've grown here before. I've got some this year, but I have one in my yard, and I've got some that I'm a greenhouse, so I get to have some I tuck away in the corner just for me. But that's one of my all-time favorite plants. So these are ones I'm going to plant out in the yard. This is the spring crop. It's called a Breba crop, B-R-E-B-A. But these were in the greenhouse all winter, which is why they look so big and lush. Mm-hmm. The one that's in my garden is just starting to leaf out. It's not, it's not this far along. I love begonias. We have a lot of different kinds of begonias, and I like most of them. I've got some favorites, which I'll show you later maybe. They're not available for sale. And man, I love tomatoes. I've got a really good one that I like. I've a cherry tomato called Sun Gold. I don't know if you've tried that one. That's a really good variety. What else do I like? I like kohlrabi. If you've never tried kohlrabi, it's one of my favorite vegetables. I'll have to show you. I have one in my garden. Really like kohlrabi, and I really like bok choy. That's an unusual Asian vegetable.
In true Amy fashion, I had to buy some items while I was there. You can actually see an entire plant haul on my personal YouTube channel, The Fuel Homestead. But I fell in love with this garden center a couple of months back when my sister introduced me to it, and it is absolutely one of my favorite places to be. Right after the interviews, Paul took me to his own personal home garden, which I think we should have a garden tour of Paul's garden as well, but we just didn't have time to go through it on that day. It was getting late and my baby was hungry, and I'm sure his family was getting close to dinner time too. But there I got to see Paul's potatoes and cabbages, and he introduced us to kohlrabi, which we had never actually had before. He actually gave us a kohlrabi to take home, and we love it. We also took home some red Russian kale, which I have never tried before, and it was delicious. Paul's garden was modest in his opinion, but it was very, very inspirational. It was very clean. He packed a lot of food into a lot of little spaces, and it proved that you can grow food just about anywhere, no matter how much or how little space you have. All right, guys, I hope that you enjoyed this week's video of our own garden tour of our own garden center that is local. Stay tuned for more different videos like this. We are going to try to do some interviews and some local farm tours and garden tours throughout the whole year, and as they become available, hopefully on Mondays throughout the year, we will definitely share them with you. Don't forget to check out the collaborators that are giving you garden tours on YouTube this week in the description of this video, and check out the playlist, the garden tour series as well, which is part of the How to Grow Your Own Food series. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Have a great week and happy homesteading.
All those veggie plants, and the gardening was a big thing. The home extension agents had meetings with the Virginia Cooperative Extension, canning methods, and had to preserve food on the farm, and that was a mainstay. So when I look about here these 60-some years later, and all these houses all through the countryside, and from in the back country roads to the around the towns, there are people that depend on food, and there's only a place to go to get that is at the store, and the store brings the food. There are a few people that do container gardening, and then I have a few spots for tomato plants and other veggies, but it's very, very small space that they don't even have. And but I say, what a change that people have to have a source of supply of food, and now with this pandemic that's on, and people realize that how valuable the grocery store is, and that's the one place they can really get the food and a dependable supply. And they even saw that could be a short supply at some points. And so it's no longer an agrarian society anymore, because people depend on the purchases of food in order to live.